Hey everyone, Rachel here from Things We Wear, and today I was going to talk about armhole grading and how to do it, and also just some things to think about. I don't think I have quite all the answers on armhole grading yet, but I can talk about my experience so far, what I found is typical in the industry, and what I'm thinking about now when it comes to armhole grading and how to grade an armhole in a way that is going to yield a better fit. So first off, I want to talk about ASTM. And I actually pulled up the ASTM website just so I can kind of review it here. So you can purchase individual PDFs of their body standard measurements. It's actually not too expensive. It's about $50-ish currently for each individual publication. So I bought mine a few years ago, but yeah, less updated. So it looks like they update every year. I am not sure where they get the body data from, and I would love to know more about that actually. And I know there are other databases of body measurements, and I'd like to do more in-depth research into what else is out there when it comes to getting that data, examining that data, thinking more deeply about it. And just so you know, what is ASTM? I did sort of pre-Google it. It is the American Society for Testing and Materials. So they set standards for certain things. And you'll notice when you use pattern making programs, you actually have, when you save as a DXF, there's an ASTM version of DXF. So that's their standard of saving as DXF, and it kind of codes the DXF in a certain way. So when it imports, it has different properties than a standard DXF. So, if you're exporting and importing, ASTM is often a good way to go. There's also the AAMA option, which we can talk about another time, but that is where that comes from and what ASTM does. So they're not specific just to fashion, but we do reference them a lot in fashion, and they do kind of give us a guideline, although not everybody follows it. Because that information is paid, I'm not going to show you everything there, but I will talk about armhole, and I'm just going to snip the armhole so we can talk about it. Actually, all right, so here is what ASTM says, and my ASTM is a couple years old, so this could be subject to change. Over here is the 00. And this is just women's regular. They call it messy. And over here is the 17 and a half. 20 will be way over here. 19 and 5/8. And let's see, what is the size 6? That's usually like what our base size is. That's 15 and 3/4. Okay, so I think the important thing to note here is arm side girth. This is a circumference of your armhole. So if you measured a tape measure all the way around your arm, starting at your shoulder, underneath your armpit, and around and back to your shoulder, that's going to be the circumference. And one thing you'll notice here, which I think is really interesting, is the way they're saying it's growing from size to size is not exactly the way that we typically grow patterns. So from 00 to 0, it's growing 1/4 of an inch. Here it's 3/8, 3/8, a quarter, 3/8, 5/8, 5/8, 5/8, and this looks like 7/8. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. It's not. I think it's weird that it's growing more and then less here. Like we have a little 3/8 jump. Maybe they're doing that to simplify rather than have 16ths be involved. But in general, I would say the point of interest to point out here is that it is overall not growing much. So from the smallest size to the largest size, 20 inches to, 19 and a half to 14 and a half. I mean, that difference is not nearly as large as the difference that we typically see on a garment when we look at size 00 to size 20. And I will explain that in a moment. So, so that's, what am I trying to say? So that's a 5-inch difference here. Okay. All right, so here is a top that I created the other day when I was explaining armhole grade, and I just used some very basic sizing here, alpha sizing. Let's say that this small is, I will actually go in and specify. Let's say this is like a 6, I'm going to call it 4-6. And the extra small would then be a 0.2. And then the double extra small will just be a 0.0. Medium's going to be an 8.10. Large is going to be 12.14. Extra large will be a 16.18. And double extra large will be a 20 to 22. Okay, so that just kind of gives us a gauge of where we are when we talk about alpha sizing compared to numeric sizing. Typically, I would say in the United States, small usually refers to size 4-6, although every brand has their own way of sizing, and this is not standardized, but I do just want to correlate things back to the ASTM table so we have kind of a frame of reference, because ASTM does use, they do use numeric sizing on their size charts. Okay, so I'm going to close out of this. And this is the front, as we know, so I'm just going to copy and paste and create a back. So first I will flip this. Oh, that's not what oh sure, yeah, that's what I want. And then I'm going to, I'm going to adjust the green line, parallel. Oh. Is that not working? Green line parallel to segment. I guess it is working, but all right, if I press save, yes, no to flipping them back. Okay, now it's going to stay in that way. And since this is the back, I do want to adjust this back neck drop here. So I'm using if you're in Tech, I'm using the multi-move tool, which is a V, and I'm just going to move up. I don't have my grid turned on. I usually like to have that on. Let's say it's really helpful, especially if you're eyeballing things. I'm going to turn off my grading for a moment and just get rid of that point, and then use my move point tool, which shortcut is Q. I really love using that shortcut. This is kind of a low back neck drop, but you know what, we're good. Listen, this is all for explanation. And now I'm going to get a little bit of, first I'm going to rename this. This is going to be my back, apply. Okay, actually I'm not going to save. Just leave it for B. All right, so first I'm going to add some points. Oh, that's move point, add point. You know what, I don't need to do that. In Tech, if you just go to move point and you start drawing, you get a point. So if you don't actually select a point in Tech, it will create one for you. So I'm just going to create my armhole. Typically with a back armhole, oh, it's just habit, sorry. I usually make the front slope greater, which is going to adjust the armhole, and I'll show you in a bit. So another way of doing that is I can increase the front slope by going minus 0.125, and actually it still looks kind of square to me. Alright, this is not a perfect pattern. This is really just for exampling, not for making perfection here. But I do just want to have some basic standards in place because it will adjust the shape of the pattern, and it's important when we're talking about grading, because of course grading is a lot about shapes and maintaining nice shapes, but also grading a pattern in a way that makes sense. So right now you'll see that the front armhole is 1/4 inch smaller than the back. I've heard some rule of thumb saying that the front armhole should be 3/8 smaller than the back armhole. I actually think that difference should be more. Personally, I find, or maybe 5/8, I feel like front armholes should be smaller than what we've been trained to think. And the reason I think that is because for women we have a bust, and if our armhole gets big, then it gaps and you get that folding in the front area. So I'm a proponent of a larger difference between front and back. So I'm just going to increase my back armhole a 1/4 inch. Cool. Yeah, because you really don't want these at the same level. When you think about it, your back armhole has more dimension to it. You have, especially if you are more muscular or you work out, you're going to have more muscles in your back area. And in your front, you tend to have more of a hollow. Naturally, people will have a hollow there, especially in their front area and across front. Right now, this is kind of more of a teardrop shape, but I'm going to make it more of a classic armhole shape. There we go. All right, it's not a perfect armhole, but it's a good example. All right, so let's just have it. So I'm going to go view, show high grading. Great. And here's our grading. So the first question I was asked is about grade points on armholes and how many grade points you want to have, etc. So let's address that first. Usually there's a grade point for the cross shoulder, which I believe I talked about in my last grading video. Typically the grading is a 1/4 inch in either direction on the half, which would be a 1/2 inch total. So usually a cross shoulders grade a 1/2 inch. I would like to argue that maybe on larger sizes it could be an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 inch total, because I just don't think that people get very wide at their shoulder unless you're physically getting to be a larger person, like you're tall and more like just a overall larger built person, rather than someone who maybe let's say if it was just me and I gained weight, my across shoulder might get a little bit bigger, but on the whole it's probably not getting that much bigger. Where I am needing it is really in my sleeve and in the sleeve cap. I feel like I need to create a sleeve piece to explain this. So all right, here's my sleeve. So the one area that I would say where you are growing when you're getting bigger is your cap width. And I know this isn't by any means this perfect pattern, but let's turn this into something. And let's use the arc tool to smooth that out. I don't love this brown pattern color. It's kind of hard to see. I don't know why it changed my pattern colors that I so specifically picked out. That's so annoying. Okay, oops. Here's my quick sleeve. So as you get bigger, not only are you getting bigger in the bicep, but often your shoulder, like the top of your arm, is going to need more width. So you're going to have more here, but you don't necessarily need it in your shoulder. So just a little thing to think about. All right, so when we grade across fronts, usually across fronts and backs are grading the same way as they are the shoulder. Sorry, just readjusting here. So you can see that automatically Tuka added the grading kind of to transition from here to up here. So in effect, this is grading in the Y axis more than it is at the cross shoulder. I have a 1/4 inch in either direction here, and this one right now is 3/8. I think typically, and what would happen, the reason that we don't want it to grade more is because, as you can see on our size small, or as we go down in sizes, you get a more dramatic difference from cross shoulder to your cross front because it's grading more inwards. And as you go out in size, this is actually coming out in comparison to the across shoulder. So you don't want to see that. You want to keep that shape kind of consistent. So first I need to make this a grading point. Okay, and then I'm going to make it a 1/4 inch. All right, so now you can see that shape at the across front and shoulder, which is a pretty key shape when we think about armholes and the way they fit people, is staying more consistent in shape as we go up in sizes. I don't love what it's doing here on the size small, but or extra, extra small. This might be just a result of this pattern not being exactly what I would normally do. That's okay. It's a little flat looking. Whoops. A little bit more. Okay. So that's an okay start. Now I want to do something. Tech is going to allow me to create a measurement chart so I can review the front armholes. So let's do that. So I'm going to call this point front armhole. Actually, yeah, front armhole quantity 1 because it's on the mirror. And then we have to do that for this point. We have to do it for all the grading points. Same thing, front armhole quantity 1. And then now let's do the same process over here. All right, so here I'm going to add a grading point, and then I'm also going to adjust it to be, whoops, be a 1/4 inch. Okay, you can see it does make the shape a little weird, especially as we get into this area. And I think that the specific question was about why there are so many points, especially in the curve. And often it's because of this area. You might get a funky shape when you look on the size extremes, like on the size extra, extra small or extra large. To me, the extra large actually looks fine, but this extra small does look a little funky. I can actually just maybe account for that by moving this point. Yeah, I don't know. It's looking a little weird, isn't it? So this might be a great reason that you would add an extra point, and I'll just do it for the sake of doing it, just to show you what that would look like. All right, now let's make that a grading point. Okay, and so it looks like it's getting too small on the smaller sizes, causing that weird shape. So I'm going to just do a 1/4 inch. Look at that, that's a lot better. Maybe not. Let's do, oops, not minus. It's very easy to get X and Y axis or minus plus confused when you're doing grading. See, that little tweak actually made a big difference in the shape. So when you do see extra grading points along the curve, it's usually to just improve the shape so that you get a better shape on every size. Sometimes this grading rule compared to that grading rule, because this is grading a 1/2 inch right now and this is grading a 1/4, it just creates some distortion when you get to larger and smaller sizes. And that's really why you might want to add another point and then adjust the grading just a tiny bit to make it transition a little better along that curve. Okay, so now that that question is answered, and this time I am going to save, yes. Let's talk about armholes. Okay, so I'm going to add a measurement point for this one too. Back armhole quantity 1. Apply. And then I need to do this for all of my grading points so that it measures all of them. Back armhole. Okay, so the problem that we run into when we talk about pattern making is as people go up in sizes, their bicep gets bigger, and so they need the sleeve to get bigger, and they need the bust to get bigger, but what we don't actually want always is for the armhole to get so big. So that's why I brought over that this little snip from ASTM showing us that in reality this circumference doesn't need to get as large as we think it does. And industry standard would tell us that on each size this is grading a 1/2 inch, and on larger sizes usually actually this grades, and yeah, it looks like, did I do this? No, I graded it a 1/2 inch. So right now it's a 2 inch grade all the way up. Often industry standards do like 3 inch grade when we get to the breakdown from large, extra large, and extra extra large. And what that means on the 1/2 is that this would actually grade 3/4 in the vertical. So it would grade even more, meaning that this circumference would get even bigger. So this is kind of tricky and weird, and this is why, in my opinion, I do think that you can improve offerings on the upper end and the lower end by fitting them, but it could be just an adjustment to the grade. But I think this is where it's tricky, because often the people who are pattern makers are not also graders. Often the people who are tech designers are not really overseeing the grade to that specific amount. Usually they are using their brand's standard grades, which is good. You do want to use your standard grades so that you create size consistency for your customer. But the issue is really getting that grading right, so that on someone who is a 1X, 2X doesn't have this huge sloppy armhole, and someone who's a size 00 doesn't have this tiny armhole that doesn't fit their arm. So I'm going to demonstrate this by going to measurements, and here we go. Now we can see all the sizes. So this is the total. Oh, okay. So I need to change something really quickly. I'll show you. I did this wrong. In case you're using Tech, when you measure lines, if it's on the mirror, you have to use the half. Try that again. And again on the back. So instead of quantity 1, you're just going to write half. And here, quantity 1, you're going to write half. Here, quantity 1, again, half. Okay, now press save. Yep. All right, so let's look at it again. Measurements. Okay, cool. So now we can see the front armhole separate from the back. Right now, yeah, they're only on the size small. It's not a huge difference. So yeah, I would probably want to change it. And this is interesting. So you can see the front armhole is relative getting larger. So here's our size small, 7.5. As we go up in size, it's getting almost 2 inches larger. On the back, it's getting more like 1.5 inches larger. So this is one problem from the outset, and this is because of the shape of the front armhole. We have more depth here from the front to the side seam, whereas in the back you have less armhole depth. And so as you go up in sizes, it's creating a bigger differential and a bigger circumference. So this right here is kind of a funky thing, because we're already seeing that the front armhole is getting bigger more than the back armhole with the same grade rules. So I don't love that, and I actually specifically don't love that because front armholes are really what it tends to look sloppy when you get to larger sizes. They tend to collapse, particularly because you have a bust and there's an excess of fabric here. Now let's compare that to this. Okay, so from our smallest size 00 to our largest size 20, and I'm just going to mark, where's my largest size, 19. Okay, so this spans it. So this is a total measurement. This is getting 5 inches bigger. And this is a half measurement. This is getting 3 inches. Okay, so it actually is fairly somewhat comparable. I'm a little confused. Let's think about this. So from size 00 to 0, we're getting 3/8 larger, about 3/8 larger. But here the total measurement's only getting 1/4 larger. Doesn't quite make sense. Let's see here. So 9 minus 7, so that's 2 inches. 9 minus 6, that's 3 inches. So 5-inch difference. Okay, yeah. I do feel a little confounded about this. I maybe have fewer sizes, and that might be why I'm not seeing the same amount of change. Okay, so this is the 0. Here's the size extra small. And here's the size 4-6, this is the small. Here's the size 6-8, this is the medium. Here's the size large. Here's large, extra large. And here's double XL. Ah, okay, so this explains it to me. All right, so hopefully you can follow along with this, my terrible screenshot drawing with my mouse here. But so from this extra small, this is only one numeric size. So we're going up, it's not quite correlating. But as we go up from here to, from extra small to small, let's compare apples to apples here, from 14 3/4 to 15.5. That's 3/4 inch of growth. And that actually is what we're seeing because each one is growing 3/8. So actually with this grade, with this industry standard grade, it is matching our arm size depth grading, which is pretty interesting. Okay, so that is great to know that that is more or less matching. I'm still a little concerned about the front armhole in relation to the bust. And I think really when I speak to this, I'm thinking about knit garments in particular and sleeveless garments. Often because if there's no sleeve to hold the armhole in place, having a front armhole that gets too big can be overwhelming. And I actually don't currently own the Plus ASTM, but I think I might purchase it and we can do a review of how the Plus ASTM is showing armhole grade and to see how that compares, because I really would like to see, in my experience, when you take a size extra large that's graded in the industry standard way, it's often too big in the armhole. Ooh. I thought of something, and this is really interesting. So I did mention this, that I didn't grade up as much as often industry standard would do. So I would say often from medium to large, it's now going up to a 3-inch grade, and this is maybe where I disagree. So if I did this, so right now with the 2-inch grade going all the way up, it's matching what the armhole grade should be. But if I did what many brands do, which is increase the grade to a 3-inch grade once you get to the larger sizes, it would distort the armhole in a way to make it too big. And this is exactly the problem that I was saying I often see. So now let's look at the measurements of that armhole and compare it. Oops, where's my snip? There we go. All right, so now when we get to the larger sizes, see, that actually made quite a dramatic difference. What once was the extra large, or once was the extra large is now the extra large. So this difference, this is a full 3-inch difference, so it's a 6-inch difference, whereas ASTM says it should be a 5-inch difference. So there you go, you have that extra whole inch of circumference in your armhole that you really shouldn't have. And I think this is where it gets a little tricky. And I'm not sure I have all the answers for it, of how I would adjust this. I'm used to taking, to me, the best way to approach plus size garments, extended sizes, is to really take a breakdown, stop at size 12. Often 12, I think, is where you start to see the biggest change in body shape and pattern shapes, and then fit it again, or fit it on a 1X, a 12, 15, or 12, 14, or 16. I am not in super favor. I think you should look at an 18, 20, but I think that when it comes to reevaluating the size, it should be somewhere more around here, because you don't want to go too far without reevaluating your sizes. So if you are starting at a small, maybe reevaluating around this area is a good place to start. And the way I might deal with a large armhole in the front, and let's look at this. Let's just look at the extra large, and then I'm going to view show high grading. So one way that I might deal with this, first off, you can see this is like a pretty extreme scoop and depth. One thing I might do for this pattern is reduce the front armhole by increasing the slope on the front. And what that actually does is, in effect, it gives you more fabric here, less fabric there, so it kind of gives you more fabric for the bust area. It can cause some weirdness in your shoulder, so I wouldn't do this willy-nilly. I would double check before you did something like this, or make sure that it feels like the right tweak. Another way of doing that same thing would just be to add that length by increasing the whole front neck drop here, let's say by a 1/4 inch. Oop, I actually want more than that. That doesn't look like anything. Okay. So now you can see there's a little bit, I just added 3/8 of an inch to the bust area, which will help give that elongation, but it didn't actually make our front armhole smaller. So that's why the way I went about it was just by moving this point here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So this is kind of like another way of doing the same thing. The big difference, well, I'm not gaining any fabric there, but I am in effect doing something similar. Another thing I might do for this size is maybe fill this in just a little bit so it's not quite so dramatic here. Oops. And another way to make, and I think this is probably the best way to make the front armhole smaller and deal with this kind of issue, is to add a dart. And a dart, basically what you're doing is you're taking fullness here and you're pushing it somewhere else. Or sometimes there are actually armhole darts they just come like this. I don't know if you've ever seen these. Sometimes it's on more of a vintage pattern. So you create that dart here, and that pulls out that excess fabric and allows there to be more dimension for the front bust. You can then close and rotate that dart to the side seam, and in effect it'll do the same thing. So what actually we are doing here is, this would be the same effect of me taking this whole thing. Let's say I'm going to raise it 3/4 of an inch to make that front armhole smaller, and then I would make these seams the same by adding a dart here. So if that makes sense. So that way these seams still match, but I still was able to shorten the front armhole. So just a few ways of accomplishing the same thing, but I think this outlines the point that it's very difficult to achieve the bust you need and the fullness in the sleeve that you need without making the circumference too large. And that's really why I'm a big proponent of darts, even in a cut and sew fabric, because when you get to those larger sizes where you have more of a bust and you have more differential between your armhole and your bust, you need a way to create that differential, and a dart is the way to go. All right, so I am gonna stop there. That was my intro to dart, or to armhole grading. I will continue with sleeve grading in the next episode, and we can talk more about sleeve grading and sleeve caps, and how I would correlate that to the body. But I know that was a bit rambly there, but I hope that explained some of the issues I find with industry standard grading, and what I'm hoping to see many brands do as we move into this era of more inclusive sizing, and sizing that is made to fit human beings and not just mannequins. All right, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave me a comment about how you liked today's video, what you'd like to learn, and what kind of software you're using, what you're working on. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.